Hello, everybody. This is Keith from Christian Warrior Training. In this episode, we're going to talk about use of force. Specifically, we're going to talk about when to use force, how to decide to use force, what's reasonable force, when and how to use deadly force, when and how to use non deadly force. Now, if you're a concealed carrier and you happen to cross my channel, that's okay. You're in the right place. Here, we are our target audience are Christians that are protecting their church, specifically church security teams, but you'll learn something too. So, if you love Jesus and you love guns, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, hit like, and leave a comment. It lets the algorithm know that other people should look at us and it gets us more exposure. Even if your comment is your favorite Bible verse, if it's just bumped to let the algorithm know it's important, whatever it takes. Okay. So let's get into it. Let's talk about use of force and what's appropriate, what's not. Now, it's been my experience that traditionally people don't use enough force. Okay. Because we have a moral trigger in our brain that keeps us from hurting people. And it's very hard to overcome that trigger, even when we have a clear reason to protect ourselves or somebody else. Now, the whole thing of excessive force, I have seen that a few times in my life. It has always been dealt with, but that really isn't as common as everybody likes to think. Now, essentially, you're going to be held to the same standard as a police officer. Okay, so this class that I'm giving you, or this talk that I'm giving you, is exactly what I give rookie police officers in the police academy. All this information came from that because ultimately, if you do use force, you're going to be held to the same legal standard as they are. There really is no difference. And I do hear things like police officers are treated so much differently in shootings. Maybe slightly, but not much. We're all going to get treated the same for the most part. Okay. So let's talk about the definition of use of force. Basically, it's the amount of effort required for you to compel compliance by an unwilling subject. Now, we're taking for granted that you're in the right. When we talk about all of this, that we're in the right, that essentially you're working at church, you're employed by the church, employed meaning including a volunteer status as a church security member. Something has happened. I'll give you a perfect example. A lady came to the church and she decided that our children's minister was possessed by the devil and he was going to kill the children, and the church was doing nothing about it. So she was there to handle it. Okay, if she's there to handle it, I'm really worried. She's obviously has a mental condition that it could cause violence upon one of our churchgoers, or in fact, the children's minister. So very politely asked her, "Why don't we go talk outside?" And she said, "Sure, I don't want to be here anyways." And she left. Problem solved, right? Well, what happens if the children minister showed up and she starts yelling at him and saying, "I'm going to kill you," and you ask her to leave, and she doesn't leave, and now she's making advances on the children minister? You're probably going to have to use force, right? So how much force are you going to need? You're going to need to use enough force to stop her from what she's doing. So there's different types of force. Now, presence, your mere presence, deters violence and no force could be used. So it's simply you just standing there and everybody knows that you're on the security team, and people realize, I probably don't want to do something bad here. This is why I like security teams. Your mere presence at the doors will deter an active shooter because they realize they can't come in and cause a problem. And this is something that we're using every day. This is our biggest deterrent right here. You've got verbal de-escalation. Make statements like, "Please leave the church right now." Now, we want to be an open and inviting church, but there are people that are going to come that will cause a disturbance. I'll give you an example like that lady that showed up that obviously has a mental disorder. In fact, she was on parole for harming children. And she comes in. So we know that she has a history of violence. We know that she imagines in her brain that the children's minister is going to do something harmful. So here, something just asking, "Hey, I need you to leave." She's obviously not welcome right now. We can pray with her outside. We can go somewhere else, but her being inside is going to cause a problem. So just asking, like, "I need you to leave the church right now," and just laying the law down. You can increase your volume and just yell, "Stop," right? That that has that verbal de-escalation. It works. A majority of the force I used as a police officer over 29 years was simply the command of stop, and people complied. It works very well. Now you can use empty hand control, right? Restrain the individual, right? You can hold on to them if you decide that you need a punch or kick. So that is another type of force. You've got less lethal methods, right? Which like it could be something that's incapacitating. Like I really like pepper spray. I think pepper spray works really well. A lot of church security teams only carry a gun, and that's it. What's going to happen is you're going to get into a shooting and they're going to ask what you could have done to de-escalate. And the only thing you have is empty hand controls. That's not good enough. It's nice to have pepper spray to say, well, I have pepper spray and I could have used it if I needed to. So it just shows that you have other options besides punching somebody and shooting somebody. Now, right now, my church, that's our only options. We're going to get pepper spray. I know it's coming because I was in a staff meeting where I simply laid out. I was like, look, our options are to punch somebody or shoot them. We have nothing in between. And you can just see the look on everybody's face of like, oh, wow, that's bad. Now, if you're a concealed carrier, same thing. What's your less lethal option? Is your only option to shoot somebody or punch them? Those are bad options. You need an intermediary in there, a less lethal device. I really like pepper spray because you can just keep it in your pocket. And the best part of it is if you have to deploy it and you spray somebody, I've sprayed a lot of people with pepper spray. And the best part about it is they could be on drugs, they could be anything. Once you spray them, they can't see anymore. It feels like there's sandpaper on your eye and your eyes are going to shut. So even the most meth fueled guy that I've had to fight, I pepper spray him. The fight's gone, man. Like, or at least if the fight's still there, where are they going to hit? They can't see very well. And so you can like go back behind them and push them down to the ground or something else, right? The last, after less lethal methods, is lethal force. Basically, you're going to use deadly force like using a firearm, but firearm isn't the only way. You could stab somebody, right? You could punch somebody and they could die from them punching them. You could hit them with a rock. There's lots of different weapons out there, but it's lethal force is basically you're going to use a way to stop them that could potentially end their life. Now, what determines our level of force? What level of force are we going to use? Now, there's imminent threat. Now, self-defense laws generally require that force be used only when there's an imminent or an immediate physical threat to oneself or a third person, like your spouse or a child. It is not justified to use force against someone who makes a verbal attack with no accompanying threat of immediate physical harm. So if a guy's like, I'm going to kick your butt, and you look at him and he's not capable of doing that, you can't just start wailing on him with a baton. Now, if a guy's got a gun and he says, I'm going to kill everybody in this church, that's an imminent threat. That's a pretty clear one, right? A guy that balls up his fist, drops his foot back and gets in a blazed stance and says, I'm going to hurt you. He is going to hurt you. That's called a pre-attack indicator. Pre-attack indicator is, balling of those fists, dropping their foot back to get a better, to steady themselves to get ready for that fight. What they're doing is going to determine your level of force, right? The guy that drops his foot back, balls up his fist, gets ready, puts him up and gets ready to fight, versus a guy that comes out with a handgun, right? Those are two different levels of force that you're going to use, right? They're determining your level of force that you're going to roll to. Now, another thing that determines a level of force is reasonable belief. Reasonable belief refers to what the person who uses self-defense could have reasonably believed on those circumstances. Now, if I come out with my gun and I walk into the church like this and I take aim, a reasonable person believes that that person's about to shoot somebody and they need to be stopped, right? Versus a guy that's concealed carrying and it's lawful where you're at and you see the bulge, there's really nothing there. In fact, by our church rules, you can carry armed. There's nothing occurring there, right? So hopefully you understand what reasonable belief is. Is a reasonable person going to believe that if a guy that walks into the church has his gun out and starts going like this, right? A reasonable person is going to believe, but they have a real gun, not a blue gun. A reasonable person is going to believe that that person is going to kill somebody, right? We'll go back to the guy that balls up his fist, holds him up, drops his foot back, and says, I'm going to beat you. a reasonable person would believe it's about to occur, right? So again, what determines the level of force would be proportional response. So the criterion means that when someone acts in self-defense, he or she must react in a way that matches that threat, right? So if the guy comes up, drops his foot back, balls up his fist, and says, "I'm going to beat your ass," and you pull, and a reasonable person would believe that's going to happen. You pull out your pepper spray and you spray a nice line right across his eyebrow, and it drips down into his eyes, and now he's like, "I can't see." That would be a proportional response, right? Let's say a guy comes in with a knife and he tries to stab somebody. Would a proportional response be pepper spray, or would a proportional response be shoot that guy? Well, a proportional response would be to shoot him. That knife is going to kill somebody, and you need to stop him right now. And you can't trust that pepper spray is going to stop them. Pepper spray is a level down from that knife. A gun is right on the same plane. So you have to have a proportional response, right? If a guy balls up his fist and drops his foot back and then you shoot him, that's not proportional response, okay? If he balls up his fist, drops his foot back, and then you pop him one to stop him and then tackle him to the ground, that's proportional response, right? And this is why we need that less lethal response, right? If your only option is to punch somebody or shoot them, there's a lot of stuff that happens in between. In fact, a majority of our stuff for proportional response is at mid-range, right? So you need another option in your church, or if you're a concealed carrier and you found your way to this channel, which if you're a concealed carrier and you found your way to this channel, God's telling you something. He's telling you that show up to church. They could use your help. You can learn something and help your life out a little bit. All right. So let's move on, right? What determines that level of force? Do you have a duty to retreat? Now, some states require that a person try to escape from an attacker before using force as self-defense. I don't believe that. Don't hammer me in the comments over it. It's nothing I can control. But there are some states that require that you retreat. I think it's foolish. I don't think you should retreat. Honestly, I think you should, sometimes you should retreat, right? Obviously, if the guy rolls up with an AR and all you have is a 6-shot revolver, you might want to go reassess where you're at and what you're doing, right? If all of a sudden 5 people show up with guns and you're all by yourself, you may want to retreat to a better location and then put up a defense, right? But if you live in a state like even California, you're able to go ahead and not retreat, right? Now I live in Idaho, which is a beautiful state, and I don't have to retreat either. You can go ahead and protect yourself. Now, some states stipulate that a person may use force as self-defense, but may not use deadly force without first trying to flee the situation. You got to find out what the laws are for your state. The main reason why I created this channel was for the people at my church. And so these are classes that we hold in security training all the time. And so we're trying to streamline everything so that they can just log on, look at these classes, and then we can move on to better stuff. For my folks in Idaho, in my church specifically that are watching this, we don't have to retreat. You just retreat if it's tactically sound, but there's no duty to retreat. All right. So what determines a level of force? Defense of others, right? It's legally defensible to defend others, but only to the extent that the person would legally be able to defend themselves. So if you're with your child and somebody's about to attack your child, you can use whatever force you need to defend your child as if that child was a grown adult defending themselves, right? Go back to that proportional defense. I know it's your child, and somebody may, like, I've seen it before where people just punch children. There are evil people in this world. But let's say that there is somebody that that punches a child. You have to use proportional defense. You can't beat the crap out of them until they're unconscious. You can only stop them from what they're doing if that means punching them and then tackling them to the ground. You're going to have to stop pretty much after that. Okay. But you need to think about all the different things that you can encounter at your church or as a concealed carrier. What are you going to run across and what are you going to have to deal with? Just remember, defense of others, you're using that force that's proportional that person could use for themselves as well. Okay. Defense of property, right? So people are allowed to use force to stop the theft of property or to immediately recover stolen property. So right now, in the churches in my area, while people are going to church, somebody is going around in a gold car and breaking into cars and stealing people's stuff. Now, if he encounters our church, we're going to see him because we have parking lot attendants and our security is outside as well. If you see them breaking into a car, you can stop them, right? So you can physically restrain them and stop them. If they try to run away with stolen property, you could pursue them, right? But you have to find out what your state allows, right? So you need to be careful and remember proportional response. I want to end this with what does the Bible say about force? Because a lot of Christians will hold up and say that they can't kill somebody or they can't hurt somebody. But I want to make it clear about what the Bible says about force. And as a police officer, I worked in a bad area, maybe not for California, but compared to the rest of the United States, it was a bad area. And I would use force, and I always felt bad about my salvation, and I could never get over that. And it really hurt me until I read a book that was made for police officers, and it was about force, and it was interesting. So Exodus 20, we have the 10 commandments. The King James Version translated the sixth commandment as "thou shalt not kill." But every major modern translation has translated that commandment to "thou shalt not murder." Now, the Hebrew word used in the original text of the sixth commandment refers to killing for your own personal gain. It has nothing to do with killing under authority. Okay. In fact, the Bible's full of killing. If somebody is coming to your church or somebody is coming to you personally to kill you or to harm you with great bodily injury, look, don't get hung up on what modern media has told us about "thou shalt not kill." It's "thou shalt not murder." You're not murdering. Okay. Just to be clear, in Exodus 21, the death penalty is commanded. Anyone who assaults and kills another person must be put to death. Exodus 21:12. And Genesis 9:6, if anyone takes a human life, that person's life will also be taken by human hands. For God made human beings in his own image. Lastly, Romans 13. Now, Romans 13, 1-5 says that every person must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. Are you in a position of authority if you're protecting your church? Yes. Yes, you are. So anyone who rebels against authorities, rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished. For authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing right, but in those who are doing wrong. Would you like to live without fear of the authorities? Do what is right, and they will honor you. And then finally, Romans 13:4, the authorities are God's servants sent for your good. But if you are doing wrong, of course you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts for your church security team. On my team, the reason why we're putting these videos online, these are usually classes that we do, live in session. We bring everybody together. Like I have training tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're gonna do it on surveillance, and we're gonna do surveillance techniques within the church. I got 67 people signed up. We're a very large church, but we have 67 people signed up. That's a lot of people. So we have found that it's better to put these trainings online. You can share this with your security teams. It's all good. But one thing that you have to do is scenario training. When we do training tomorrow after our classroom portion, and I'll end up putting up our surveillance training. I'll end up putting it up here. It has to be followed with scenario training. You have to do it safely. I'm going to do another video on how to do scenario training safely at your church so you understand how that's done. I think it's super important to do that scenario training because what we're finding where people are weak. We're finding out where people aren't doing a good job. For us, our problem is command authority, and it's people using their command to tell people to stop, to do certain things. And so we're doing scenario training that is directing them in that direction, that's directing them to use their authority and to get used to it. Scenario training is very effective. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video. Do me a favor, share this. Let everybody know about it. Let all your security teams know about this stuff. But also hit that like, subscribe, and the notification bell. Leave a comment. Your favorite Bible verse. I love that one. Guys, I look through and see what you say. I love the conversations that come up from that. Let me know. All right. That's all I've got for now. Remember your ABCs. Always be caring.